of the week, Paul has very weird language. So rest assured, we start with Philemon next week, so don't worry. Grace and peace to you from God our Creator, Jesus Christ the Son, by the power of the Holy Spirit. Amen. When my family was on vacation last month at Barb Basic's amazing condo, thank you again, Barb, we visited the Christ Church in Weems, Virginia. It is one of the historic churches in Virginia. It was built in the 1730s, and it is one of the oldest original surviving colonial churches in the United States, mostly because they weren't on train tracks, so when the Civil War happened, it was spared. But it was wonderful to be able to see this original structure. But one of the things I was surprised to learn about Christ Church was that when it was originally built, the congregation followed the practices of purchasing pews. This was really common in the Roman Catholic Church prior to the Protestant Reformation. Each year, a church would sell a family pew through tithing. If your family tithed more, your pew would be moved to the front in a place of honor. And if your family tithed less, your pew would be moved to the back of the church. Now I know, as Lutherans, we all like to sit in the back of the church as if that's the place of honor. But there was a time when people wanted to sit close to the pastor. This practice of selling pews was also one of the reasons why early immigrants objected to the Church of England when they left for the Americas. And so it seemed really strange to me that this Episcopalian church in the colonial times that was established still observed the practice of selling pews. And as we toured the church, you could actually see the nameplate spots and the screws that were used to take these nameplates on and off as people moved their pews up and down the church in their place of honor. We joke about having our pew in worship, but I suspect you would all be pretty horrified if someone from the stewardship committee told you that you could only sit in your favorite spot if you gave enough to the annual fund. Despite the shock we would feel that you have to earn your pew, the idea of having assigned seating based on class isn't all that unusual. The elite kids at school lunchrooms sit at the cool kids table. The head of the family sits at the foot or head of the table on Thanksgiving and is given the honor of carving the turkey. A bridal party sits at what we call table of honor in the reception hall. When I was in high school, only the utmost echelon band geeks were allowed to sit in the back of the bus as we went to marching band competitions because they were the coolest, because being in marching band is super cool. At the Art Museum, where I volunteer on Fridays, the executives have offices on the third floor that overlook the lagoon, and the security guard managers and gift shop managers have their offices in the basement. And now, even in my Zumba class, now that I've been certified, there's an expectation that I should move to the front of the class when I'm not leading because I somehow am better than the newbies who need to stay in the back. I disagree with this, by the way. My water's better in the back. While at first it may seem that Jesus' conversation about who should eat where on the Sabbath may seem like something that's hard to relate to, seriously consider the ranking order of physical spaces in the circles you travel through. When was the last time that you regularly saw a janitor have lunch with the CEO? We use physical space to divide ourselves from each other as an unspoken way of saying who belongs with who. This is what red carpets and velvet robes are all about. Who is given the place of honor? Jesus reminds us that in the kingdom of heaven, everyone belongs with everyone else. There is no cool kids table. There is no red carpet for a certain group of folks. In baptism, everyone is given a seat of honor. And our work as children of God claimed in these honorable waters of baptism is to not only receive that hospitality from Jesus, we're supposed to extend that hospitality to others. And the letter of Hebrews gives us some guidance on how to do that, as clunky as it is to read. Paul invites us to imagine what it's like to be the person who gets assigned the less desirable seat at the table, and to think about how it makes them feel. There's an old adage, we should walk a mile in someone else's shoes, and that is exactly what Paul is encouraging us to do today. Paul tells us to remember the person in prison by first imagining how we would feel if we were in prison. That we should take care of those who have been tortured as we remember our own suffering. To treat our spouses with the same fidelity we want our spouse to offer us. Kevin always jokes that he doesn't want to end up in a retirement community because he calls it old people jail. And I think it's because we can imagine how hard it is to be left alone in a retirement community. What if we treated our homebound the way we would want to be treated if we were in their position? When we imagine what it's like to walk in another person's shoes, we are doing the work of Christ. This work is faithful because Jesus was first faithful to us. Jesus wanted to walk a mile in our shoes, to wear the brokenness of humanity, because he loves us so much, he wanted to be with us in all things. That's why Jesus was born as a human, to join us in all of our experience. Jesus was born to working class people, to a carpenter under a scandalous marriage, so he could understand the controversy of families that come together in unusual ways. Jesus understood what it was like to be bullied and persecuted, so he allowed himself to be bullied and persecuted on the cross as crowds doubted his sovereignty. Jesus wanted to extend hospitality to those who hungered and thirsted, and so he made a regular discipline of retreating to the desert to fast. Walking a mile in someone else's shoes is the work of Christ. Hebrews tells us that true hospitality begins when we do this work, and it is faithful work because we are following the Jesus that was yesterday, today, and forever. He is our best example to follow. It's not always easy, though. I think it's fitting that the Holy Spirit would give us these set of passages on Labor Day weekend of all things. In its own regard, Labor Day is a day that we as a nation imagine what it's like to walk in another person's shoes, and imagine what it's like to share hospitality with those who labor in situations that are worse than ours. The origins of Labor Day find themselves in the Industrial Revolution, as most of you know. And during the 1800s, most people worked 12-hour work days, 7 days a week, to make what we would now call a basic living. And despite a few states having restrictions, children as young as 5 and 6, as young as our children who are here with us in worship today, labored in mills and factories and mines across the country and were compensated for half or less than half of what adults made for the same work. People of all ages, particularly the poor and the immigrants, faced unsafe working conditions with insufficient access to fresh air or sanitary facilities or breaks. And so on September 5th in 1882, 10,000 workers took unpaid time off in New York and marched from City Hall to Union Square, holding the first ever parade in the United States to honor those who labor. They didn't call it Labor Day then, but this idea of a working man's holiday celebrated on the first Monday in September caught on in other industries across the country. Eventually, about 12 years later, Congress passed this as an official holiday and Grover Cleveland signed it into law. We celebrate and observe Labor Day because someone we never met imagined what it would be like to walk in our shoes and to experience unsafe working conditions, to experience exhausting work days, to experience children having to work for our own benefit. Jesus reminds us all that we need to have Sabbath rest. And when we do that, we are giving each other a place of honor. When we observe the fact that everyone deserves a right to rest on Labor Day, we are doing what Jesus calls us to do. We are honoring the poor and the crippled and the lame. We are giving them a place of honor. We are giving them the rest we ourselves want to have. We adhere as a nation to these principles of extending hospitality through rest because that is what Jesus offers us. He is our place to rest. Jesus advocated for our ability to rest and restore. Jesus advocated for us to have a place at the table that was one of honor. And when we imagine the working conditions of others and advocate for everyone to have everything that we hope to experience, we are following the examples of Jesus. This is the heart of Labor Day, not to have apple pie and watch parades. It's to acknowledge that there are some people in this world, in our very nation, who are not given a day to rest, who are not given a day to travel, to go on the lake, to have a picnic, because their lives are not given a place of honor in our society. Jesus calls us to give them a place of honor at the table. We don't live in a time anymore where you need to buy your pew to have a place to worship on Sundays. But what other ways do we expect people to earn what Jesus so freely gives us? What other ways do we act and systems we contribute to that make people have to prove they are worthy of the gifts Jesus freely offers us? Should be our prayer this Labor Day. To give thanks for the rest God offers, and to think about how we can join Jesus in that process of giving everyone a place